No, I'll be honest. Ah. All right, folks, welcome back to the Roland Martin Show. This idea of total immersion and valuing education has to become so ingrained in our psyche has to become so fundamental that we do it without even realizing that we are doing. Child comes into the kitchen. Mama, I was watching this show. Mama or Daddy, I was watching this show and it was good. Son, daughter, what was it about? What was the plot? What was the storyline? How did it start? What was the beginning, the middle, and the end? You now, through your questioning, are forcing that child to begin to think and explain. What channel was it on? Second nature. You're in the car. You are running errands on a Saturday. That's great. Child's in the car. What are you doing while the child is in the car? You're running errands for 2 or 3 hours. Do you have music on in the car? Are you listening to music? Do you have a car or SUV and has a DVD player? If it does, what are you playing on it? Okay, let's say you don't have a DVD player, but your child has their phone and their child has an iPad and you're running errands all day. What is your child doing the whole time? Is your child playing games? If so, what kind of games is your child playing? Is your child watching any young Edison videos? What are they doing? Are they learning? What are they learning? Let me take it further. You have a newborn. Your newborn is strapped in the back of your seat. Do you have an iPad mounted or Samsung pad mounted? And then you've got Baby Genius playing and it's showing shapes and colors. See, I know somebody's going, damn, Roland, that's a whole lot, bruh. Why are you saying all of this? Because for every waking moment, your child is learning. I'm talking at 0 to 5. I'm talking vital that is. See, I know what this means because when my wife and I helped raise the second set of nieces, they were twins. Rachel and Raquel came to us at 1.5 years. Rachel and Raquel at 1.5 years were constantly being taught that was a television, that was a channel. I don't know, what was it, a baby channel? It was some channel that DirecTV had. And we had the channel on. Brain constantly being stimulated, constantly learning. Same thing when they got in the car. Same thing when we took them places. So guess what? When Rachel and Raquel went back to Texas, 3 years old, guess what happened? Rachel and Raquel went to daycare and was so far ahead of every other kid in daycare, and they were trying to understand why. They were trying to understand why because what we did is we were constantly feeding Rachel and Raquel. If they knew shapes and sizes and colors, and they knew words, and they knew this and that. And guess what I learned that day at the State of Black Children in America report? Marion Wright Edelman said this. Jeffrey Canada said this. They said the number of Black children who show up in kindergarten not even knowing 250 words was abysmal. That means that from 0 to 5, I need y'all to listen to me on this. A significant number of our children are showing up to kindergarten not even knowing 250 words. That means what was happening from 0 to 5 was non-existent. And so when you look up and we see achievement gap, discrimination in funding, resources, bad schools, further exacerbates that problem. And so the reason I have launched the school choice is the Black Choice Initiative is because I cannot stand silently by as I watch Black children who have no choice but to go to these poor, dilapidated schools that are not training them, that are not educating them. But while I am fighting for school choice, while I am fighting for better traditional schools, better public charter schools, while I am fighting for vouchers as well, I also am imploring Black America to pay attention to what is happening 0 to 5. Because if we are not operating as the original teachers, if we are not operating as their original teachers, then our kids will have issues. A doctor would tell you, deprive someone of oxygen to the brain could lead to lifelong complications. Deny a child a real education, same thing. I'm trying to tell you folks, we have a crisis and we better treat it like one. We're going to keep having problems. This is Roland Martin Show. Back in a moment. All right, folks, welcome back to the Roland Martin Show. The reason this thing is so personal to me is because when we look at what's happening in our community, I'm simply not understanding this whole piece when you talk about graduation rates and what's happening with our children. Just me. Got some folks who want to talk about this here. Let's go to the phone calls. Brandon in North Carolina. Brandon, you're on Roland Martin Show. What's up? Good. Will y'all calm down?
I mean, if they pay attention to it, they'll have to spend more money, and it results in you have to get to the root of the problem, and the root of the problem is going to go back to hundreds to 200 years ago, 300 years ago. They know where it came from. So when we're looking at these things, we're trying to think of the answers of our society, and it's a big concept that I'm studying right now for my doctorate degree in is urban PTSD. Urban PTSD is the same thing. You know, things that we see, the children that they grow up seeing. I can just imagine a 12-year-old in the city of Chicago who's coming home from school one day and all of a sudden in the crossfire. Imagine the trauma that they have to deal with when they're growing up in that environment.
Absolutely. I mean yeah. The reality is the level of trauma that exists is real, and we must contend with that. But what I'm talking about is, I believe, is equally traumatic when a kid is not prepared from 0 to 5.
Exactly. Definitely, 100%. And it's just like this cycle will continue.
Yeah.
As parents, so of course we need to step up and make things happen. But when you're placed inside of a box, you may have 1 to 2 of us that make it out of that box. But at the same time, it's all these other ones who are, suffering from the same impact from this continuous cycle.
Got it.
Going a little further, and it's like the school system is not set up in our favor. For example, when it comes to teacher and student ratio. Class sizes in the city is about 30 to 1.
Okay.
The state exams that they take are based upon those smartest schools for that grade level. That teacher student ratio is about 1 to 10. Schools in every city are required to take the same exam, same test, even though their environment is a little bit different. They have to meet the same standards as those where the teacher and student ratio is 1 to 10.
Okay. I appreciate it, man. I got to go to the next phone call. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Oh, no.
All right, then let me go to Egypt in Detroit. Egypt, you're on the Roland Martin Show.
How you doing?
Doing great.
I still got the song from your dancing last night and burns in my head. I'm still singing your song.
Alice Smith's Fool for You.
Yeah, I had it download. I had Steve's low version, but you got me hit the Alice, and I got it last night, so I'm down. But what I'm calling about this morning is exactly what you're touching on. It touches my life because I am the child of 2 visually impaired parents. My father had some type of congenital eye disease, which took his eyes at 10. But my father was pushed by his mother to be the best that he could possibly be, sighted or not. And my father went on and got his bachelor's and went on and got his master's and became a social worker. My mother, her mother took some type of drug while she was pregnant that she shouldn't have taken, didn't have proper prenatal care. My mother was born visually impaired with a curved spine and all other types of allergies, respiratory problems because her lungs didn't form properly. And it was an aunt of ours, not my grandmother, which mind you, I love her to death, and she put everything in. I can't see stuff, my aunt wasn't having it. And my aunt took my mother and sat her down, visually impaired, with everything else that was going on and taught her how to sew. My mother is an accomplished seamstress and tailor. My mother went through all of her high school and Michigan school, and she busted it out. And how she made her money while she was at school to support herself was altering the dresses of the little white girls who had money. My mother put out everything that she put forth, that she put into me. She went through, she got her bachelor's in political science, she got her master's degree in art education, and has developed programs to teach disabled children, visually, hearing impaired, you name it, whatever their disability is, she developed a program to be able to teach children. And my mother instilled in me, part of the time of me growing up, I'm 47. And all the time when I was growing up, my mother didn't even invest in the TV. She said, TV is not good for you, and I'm not having it. My mother made me listen to what she listened to. When my mother got talking books from the library for the blind, I had the printed book, and that's how my mother started reading with me. And she would go back and be able to correct me. So if my mother can do that, being visually impaired and not being able to read a print book, and I had the print book, she still read with me. She took me to museums. She took me to dance classes. I started dancing at 3. When I started preschool, I could already read. So my son, he told me, I'm a big brother now. He taught my daughter how to read by word association with a Dr. Seuss book. I thought that, when I was teaching my kids, learning how to read and all of this stuff was important. My son said, I'm a big brother. So he takes his sister, he says, Mom, look, guess what? And my daughter starts reading this book. When she went to preschool at 3 years old, she could already read. The next one that was along, when she went to preschool, she could read. So what you're saying is that 0 to 5, and now I have 2 grandchildren, that is so important because they mimic what they see. My grandson can already tell you about Africa and Egypt and everything else. So that is, I'm telling you,
I got you.
The best thing to possibly do.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
All right, then. Thank you very much. Folks, got to go to a break. This is Roland Martin Show. Back in a moment.
call 844-736-7474 and talk to Roland Martin next. We'll be back.
Dave, what are you doing?
Just sending a gift to Dave 2037.
Who?
Me in the future. I save a little money from every paycheck as a gift to Dave 2037, so you can spend it on things like anti-gravity boots or a hologram Doberman, something cool like that. I think Dave 2037 deserves it. He worked hard. What are you getting Steve 2037?
I guess I was thinking Steve 2037 would just fend for himself.
Well, all right, but don't expect to be borrowing my anti-gravity boots.
You want to have money in your future? You got to start saving now. Putting some money from every paycheck into a savings account or contributing to your 401k can make a big difference later. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free ideas and easy ways to save, go to feedthepig.org. That's feedthepig.org.
Hey, let's just hope Steve 2037 doesn't get his hands on a cold time machine, because he's going to come back here and knock some sense into you.
This message brought to you by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants and the Ad Council.
A promise was made. A promise that hit the beaches of Normandy. A covenant that split the skies over Berlin. A vow that captured Iwo Jima. A promise was made. A solemn oath that liberated Seoul. A sacred trust that defended Quezon. A pact that dug in Da Nang. A contract that weathered the test. A promise was made. A pledge that stormed the desert in Iraq. A bond that patrolled door to door in Fallujah. An IOU that braved IEDs in Kandahar. A promise was made to America's veterans. A promise we all must keep. DAV fights for all veterans and their families so they get the health care, financial benefits, and support they earned. If you're a veteran who needs help or you'd like to help us keep the promise, visit DAV.org.
You serious?
As I walk this land of broken dreams,
Stacey Roland Martin. Yeah, they can get. For somebody said that the link is expired, so I was literally going to play it right now on my radio show. So if you could, if they can get it, email me right back. I'll literally. How long was the conference call? Yeah. If you can get me that link right now, I'll literally play it. And I've got, I got thousands who are watching on Facebook and Periscope plus the radio. So let me know. Okay. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. All right, folks, welcome back to the Roland Martin Show. We were talking about this issue of education, what matters, how critically important it is to our communities, and not just when they are in kindergarten, first, second, third grade. What happens 0 to 5 is crucial to the development of our children. Melinda in North Carolina, you're on the Roland Martin Show. What's your comment?
Hi, Roland. I am so feeling on this topic. When I was pregnant with my son, I used to put headphones on my stomach, have him listening to ABCs, how to count, colors, all that different stuff, because I felt like once you're in utero, you can hear the vibrations. Studies have shown that. So that's what I started doing for my child. So when he was born, I would still have him listening to the same tape. I never talked baby talk to him. I talked to him just like I'm talking to you right now, so that he could form his words, put together sentences. So by the time he did start talking, he was pretty fluent. By the time he went to school, he was reading. Because he was a black child, white people were amazed. I had a speech therapist stop me one time because I was interacting with my son. He was about 2 years old. And she was stunned. She said, "How old is your son?" And he's tall, big for his age. He was 2 at the time. And she was just like appalled that he could speak fluently. So, and studies have shown that by the time your child turns 5, that their personality is already developed. So it's imperative that you get in there, interact with your child, put as much as you can into your child as early as possible, so they will have the best advantages when they start school.
All righty. I appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
All right. Jervy in Texas, you're on the Roland Martin Show.
Yes, hi. I definitely want to just piggyback off of the caller that you just spoke with. I agree 100% that you definitely have to start from the time they are babies on up. And just as she stated, she never baby talked to her son. I didn't do that with my daughter as well. And people just like her stopped her when they would hear her son talk. They stopped me as well when they would hear me interacting with my daughter. And they just could not believe how clear she spoke at such a young age. They would ask me the same things. How old was she? She went to daycare, and they basically started a learning program there. And so from there, she went on to pre-K, and luckily they had a accelerated program at the pre-K that she was going to. And her teacher was just astounded and just recommended she get tested for the program. She got accepted into the program, and then from there she was in there learning on a kinder level. So I'm definitely in agreement with that. You know, learning from 0 to 5 is very important.
All righty. I appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Let's go to Shira in Florida. Shira, how you doing?
Hi, Roland. I wanted to address when you had talked about saying it starts in the womb, and you said somebody had disagreed with you about that, and I'm telling you, my daughter's suffering. Hold on. Here. You want orange? So, we're talking about it starts in the womb, and someone disagreed with you, and I wanted to say it does start in the womb. My daughter was born 26 weeks, which is 13 weeks early, which is three months early. I experienced a lot of emotional, spiritual, mental, and verbal abuse while I was pregnant with her. And I believe that stress led to me having her so early. I have 2 other kids who I had late. And having her so early, she needed a lot of help, a lot of therapy. At one point, she was going to therapy 4 days a week, plus at home having an early interventionist. And everything that she's had to learn, I've had to teach her. Roll over, sit, to walk, crawling, walking, talking, using her hands. Everything that she's had to learn had to be taught where other kids are naturally developing into these different levels. So the idea that the conditions in which a child is in utero does not affect that child is foolish, because it does. You know, thank God that my baby, she's made a great advances. We've had to do, but it's taken a lot of effort, a lot of work on our part and her part, and she's doing very well. You know, she's 2 now. She's not completely caught up, but she's advanced quite well. So what I'm trying to say is, don't think that how you treat your pregnancy or how you treat others in their pregnancy does not affect that child, because that child is going to be the greatest affected in that. You know, eat right, be happy, be joyful, make sure your situation is a pleasant one, a good one, the best one you can have for your child, because that is going to be have a great positive effect on your child. It's not worth trauma. It's not worth it, whether it be physically, mentally. It's not worth how it can affect your child. I know that, you know, this is talking about education. When I heard you say that someone disagreed with you about what happens in utero affecting the child and thinking that it doesn't, it does. You know, yes, it's important. I sit down every day. When we're riding in the car, you know, you're talking about riding in the car, we sing our ABCs, we count. Everything I'm focusing on is on her learning. And I have no choice, because I know that's how she's going to have a fighting chance. So it does start before you even have the child. It starts how you treat yourself before you get pregnant. It starts a long time before that child comes into this earth. And so don't think it doesn't, because it does. And I know firsthand how much conditions in pregnancy affect children because of how it affected mine. I just wanted to make that clear.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Let's go to Roland in Ohio. Roland, you're on the Roland Martin Show.
Hello?
You're on the air.
Oh, I want to speak with you in private.
Excuse me?
I would like to speak with you in private.
You can't talk to me in private because I'm actually live on the radio. So the best thing you need to do is send me an email. So let me I'll put you on hold. If they can shoot you the email. So hold on 1 second. 844-736-7474. 844-736-7474. Folks, this is very simple. When we look at what's happening in our community, when you talk about what can you be in control of, you are in control of your child's education. You do not have to ask somebody for permission to make your kid read every day. You do not have to seek somebody's permission in order to make your child do extra homework when it comes to math or whatever. You don't have to. You are in complete control of that. And what I want us to do is to be in complete control of our destiny. I want us to be, I love the phrase, all I can do is all I can do. If you tell your kid you're going to read 20 books a month, no government can tell you can't do that. What is somebody going to say? That's child abuse. Have your child read a book and have them do a report. Have them verbally read out aloud. You hear me? Have them verbally, because you want to hear how they are voicing it. You want to hear to make sure they are pronunciating the words correctly. You want to ensure.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to today.
That they are doing this thing right. That's all I'm saying, y'all. Let's control what we can control. This is the Roland Martin Show, back at home.
Reach the TD1 conference bridge. Please press star followed by your conference number.
I will listen carefully to all students who seek my help and act on their behalf. I will work with other caring adults to create a safe learning environment for all the students in my school.
Have reached the TD1 conference bridge. Please press star followed by your conference number. Thank you.
Yep. No, what's going to happen is I'm actually going to play. No. Hold on. What I'm saying is I'm going to play on my show a recorded interview, and so that's going to go through the next 40 minutes. So we're fine. So I'll introduce it. I'll hit play, and that's fine. Yeah, look, the vision of the show is simple. It's for us to do what I'm calling an election night party. It's for us to do it differently, not necessarily like the rest of these shows where they have, of these sort of things. But what we do is we also emphasize the ability for us to be able to utilize our star power. Our ability to be able to call up whether it's celebrities or anyone else to be able to be on. Look, we can pre-identify exactly what states we want to focus on, what races we want to focus on. So we know for a fact that we're going to be looking at the race in the congressional race in Delaware, where the sister could be the first Black woman elected to the United States Congress from Delaware. We know the exact same thing as we look at what's going to happen in California. with the Kamala Harris race. We'll be looking at that particular race. And so we can identify that, and that's information that we can also track as well. So as the night progresses, as the night goes on,
and we officially launched Election Protection, the nation's largest nonpartisan voter protection coalition. And, you know, as we ramp up efforts toward the 2016 presidential election, we want to make sure that you hear from our leaders of election protection, and that you know that the Election Protection Coalition is here to answer any questions you might have and to inform you of resources available to voters and also to you as reporters this election cycle. Today, you will hear from Kristen Clark, who is the President and Executive Director of the National Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, followed by Christine Chen, who is the Executive Director of the Asian and Pacific Islander American Vote Organization. Followed by Christine, you'll hear from Mi Mua, who is the President and Executive Director of the Asian Americans Advancing Justice. And then you will hear, last but certainly not least, from Arturo Vargas, who is the Executive Director of the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials, known as NALEO. With that, I'll turn it over to Kristen Clark, President and Executive Director. One quick note for all the reporters on the line. The call is being recorded, so I just wanted to disclose that for everyone up front. Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. This is Kristen Clark. I'm President and Executive Director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, which leads the Election Protection Program in partnership with many of the organizations on this call and more than 100 other partner organizations across the country. I'm going to take a moment to describe how the program operates to safeguard voting rights and provide information on the way that we work to ensure access to the ballot box for voters across the country. I want to first briefly note three core observations about this election cycle. First, this is the first presidential election cycle to be conducted in more than 50 years without the full protections of the Voting Rights Act in place. Since the Supreme Court's 2013 ruling in Shelby County, Alabama v. Holder, we have seen states across the country race forward with efforts to make voting more difficult for voters. Second, the U.S. Department of Justice has terminated core components of its long-standing Federal Observer Program. Under this program, the Justice Department had deployed specially trained individuals inside polling places in certain communities that were covered by the Voting Rights Act. Without the Federal Observer Program, voters in some communities are more vulnerable this election cycle. Third, we are very much aware of calls that have been made by a presidential candidate to activate law enforcement and private untrained individuals to watch and look for problems at the polls in November. We are concerned about the intimidating effect that this mass call for police officers and untrained individuals can have on minority voters. And finally, Congress has failed American voters. Congress went into recess last week without taking action to restore the Voting Rights Act. And Congress did this despite evidence making clear that voting discrimination and voter suppression is alive and well across the country. Those facts inform the backdrop against which we conduct our work this election cycle. I want to now turn to talking to you about the Election Protection Program, which is a nonpartisan effort to safeguard the right to vote for voters across the country. The program has been in place for more than 14 years. A core component of the program involves an 866-hour vote hotline. This hotline is staffed by legal volunteers who field questions and complaints from voters all across the country. The hotline is live today, taking calls from voters 7 days a week between the hours of 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. These hours will be expanded as we move closer to Election Day. Through the Election Protection Program, we also train and deploy between 3,000 and 5,000 lawyers and legal volunteers who are trained to resolve voter complaints by way of the 866 Our Vote hotline and through field programs in select states across the country. In 2012, we were present in 22 states with several thousand volunteers. We anticipate being in 26 states this election cycle with a larger cadre of legal volunteers. The states that we will be present in include Alabama, Arizona, Arkansas, California, and Colorado, Florida, Georgia, and Illinois, Louisiana, Massachusetts, and Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, and Nebraska, Nevada, New Jersey, New Mexico, and New York, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, and Tennessee, as well as Texas, Virginia, and Wisconsin. Our volunteers receive training on the law that applies in the specific states they are assigned to. Another important component of the effort is voter education. There have been a number of important court rulings issued very late in 2016, which changed the rules that will apply this November. Our legal volunteers are working to promote voter education around the country to make sure that voters are aware of the specific rules that will apply in their state. What are the particular issues that we are concerned about this election cycle? In Texas, we are concerned about the proper implementation of new rules concerning photo ID, following the Fifth Circuit's recent ruling finding that law discriminatory. In North Carolina, we have seen local efforts to cut back early voting hours, an act of resistance to the Fourth Circuit's ruling finding the state law at issue there to be discriminatory. In Georgia, we have seen voter suppression efforts at the state and local level. In Arizona, we observed election officials reduce the number of polling sites in use during the primary, resulting in long lines and 5-hour wait times. Nationally, but particularly in Pennsylvania, we are mindful of the potential for unwarranted voter challenges and voter intimidation. In each of our call centers and field command offices, we will have leadership and experts who are prepared to respond to the particular problems that arise in each state. Based on what we observed during the primary season, we anticipate a greater number of calls than we've ever received relative to prior presidential election seasons. So far to date, we have heard from more than 30,000 voters across the country. And by the end of this election season, we expect to hear from between 250 to 300,000 based on efforts from prior election seasons. You can find the hotline schedule on the Election Protection website, which is www.866ourvote.org. I'll close by noting that while we field calls that range from questions about voter registration rules to questions about absentee voting and early voting opportunities, we also receive complaints regarding potential voter suppression. It is important to note that in the final weeks before an election, we historically tend to see efforts to make voting more difficult by way of 11th hour polling site changes and purging of the voter rolls, among other actions. We encourage voters to bring questions and report complaints to the 866 Our Vote hotline. I will pause there and turn the floor over to our partner.
Folks, hold tight. We'll be right back on the Roland Martin Show in just a moment. Well, here's the deal. They may have video capability, or they may not. What I'm saying is, if it's Alicia Reese, who's the head of Black Caucus in Ohio, okay? Here, let's say,
Can you tell if the surfaces in this kitchen are crawling with bacteria that could cause chronic arthritis? Listen. You can't, can you? You can't see it either. Wash surfaces, utensils, and hands frequently with soapy water while preparing food, especially when handling raw meats or eggs. Raw food may contain bacteria that can make you very sick, or worse. 1 in 6 Americans will get sick from food poisoning this year, and roughly 3,000 will die. But you can keep your family safer by cleaning with soap and water as you go. Learn more about this and other important information. Check your steps at foodsafety.gov. That's foodsafety.gov. A public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
Hey, there he is. How's it going? I'm having a stroke. Are you going to shake my hand or what? I'm having a stroke. Wow, you're not even moving your arm. I'm having a stroke. Are you okay? I'm having a stroke. Your face looks weird too. I'm having a stroke. Are you having a seizure or something? I'm having a stroke.
When someone is having a stroke, they may not be able to say it with words, but their body language will tell you loud and clear.
I'm having a stroke.
Yeah. You just need to know the sudden signs. Look for FAST, F-A-S-T. F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. Or S, speech difficulty. Time to call 911 immediately, because the sooner they get to the hospital, the sooner they'll get treatment, and that can make a remarkable difference in their recovery. Know the sudden signs: face, arm, speech, time. Spot a stroke fast. Visit strokeassociation.org. Brought to you by the American Stroke Association and the Ad Council.
I'm so in love with you. Whatever you want to do is all right with me. 'Cause you make me feel so brand new. I want to spend my life with you. Baby, since we've been together, loving you forever is what I need. Let me be the one you come to. Never be untrue. Oh, baby, let's stay together. Loving you well. And the good and bad, happy or sad. So,
It's time to get back to the issues that matter. Let's get back to the Roland Martin Show.
All right, let's talk to Pierre Watson. Now let's talk to Sam Jackson. My idea is that making a part that's not making traditional coverage. So if I'm watching at night and I'm going to look at traditional coverage, I'm going to have a lot of options. Very few people are going to do what you're trying to do.
Here's more of the conference call about protecting the vote on election day.
Christine Chen. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, this is Christine Chen with Asian and Pacific Islander American Vote. We're a national nonpartisan organization that works with local community partners to mobilize Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in electoral and civic participation. This year is essentially the largest mobilization of Asian American and Pacific Islander voters in history. AAPI Vote builds AAPI local power and civic engagement at the grassroots level, working with an unprecedented number of community partner organizations across 25 states this year. This work is particularly key as we head into the first presidential election without the full protections of the Voting Rights Act, leaving AAPI communities vulnerable and without the safeguards that have existed for the last 50 years. Our 1-888-API Vote hotline serves as a resource to defend API voters, especially in the year when our communities are more empowered. API Vote's recent survey in partnership with Asian American Advancing Justice, AJC, and API data found that Asian American voters are more enthusiastic about this year's election than past elections. About 51% of voters are more enthusiastic. We know that exclusionary rhetoric is in part driving Asian American voters this year, where 40% would vote for someone else if a candidate espouses anti-immigrant rhetoric, and 43% would vote for someone else if a candidate espouses anti-Muslim rhetoric. A major barrier for AAPI voters that we work with to resolve is language access. Limited English proficient AAPI voters turned out 9% lower than English proficient voters in 2012. That is why our hotline is available in language, including Mandarin, Cantonese, Korean, Vietnamese, Tagalog, Urdu, Hindi, and Bengali. Through all of our partners, we're focusing heavily on voter education this year, including this hotline in our field programs, everything from phone banking to direct mail pieces. So the 888 API Vote hotline will be running from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and will serve not only existing API voters this year, but help us build a culture of political participation for our new voters. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mee Moore, and I'm the President and Executive Director for Asian Americans Advancing Justice. I'm going to reiterate the point that we are just weeks away from electing a new president of the United States. And as Kristen said earlier, it is the first time we've had a presidential election since the disappointing Supreme Court Holder versus Shelby County decision, where voter protections were basically sacrificed. Advancing Justice AJC fights for equal access and voting rights for the Asian American and Pacific Islander communities and other communities of color who face the challenges of discriminatory voting laws and lack of access to in-language voter resources. These obstacles have contributed to lower and do a disservice to the democratic process in which we're all entitled to participate. So through our continued partnership with API Vote and the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under the Law, Advancing Justice AJC is working to ensure that Asian American voters are prepared to vote through our Asian language hotline. This year, there are more than 9.3 million eligible Asian American voters in November. And we want to empower Asian Americans to vote and engage in the political process so we can collectively move elected officials on issues of importance to our communities and help shape the agenda for our country in a way that addresses our needs and concerns. As Christine has already shared some data from the Advancing Justice AJC APIA vote and AAPI data joint 2016 voter survey, but I wanted to point to two key findings. At the time of our survey back in the spring, 73% of those surveyed, Asian American voters surveyed, have not been contacted by the Republican Party, and 62% have not been contacted by the Democratic Party. And though both presidential candidates recently have made attempts to reach out to our communities, it was clear from the research that political officials often don't reach out to our community to inform them of who they are or the issues that they stand for. Furthermore, from the research, we found that 37% of Asian Americans identify as independent, meaning that their vote is up for grabs to the party that addresses the issues that the Asian American community cares about. Adding further to the barriers of civic engagement are the rules surrounding voting. They're often complicated and discourage voters within our community. Voter discrimination, language barriers, lack of access to voter resources are ways that people have used to manipulate the system and restrict our community from having equal say in the democratic process. Furthermore, unfamiliarity with the voting process or with political candidates contribute to lowering the levels of civic engagement as well in our community. And we have seen that too often these challenges stand in the way of Asian Americans being able to achieve our full potential in political power. And we know, and the demographics show, that we are growing significantly because of our rapid population growth nationwide and increased naturalization. So now is the time to step up our efforts to motivate, mobilize, and make sure that we protect our rights to vote. So as Christine has said, the 1-888-API vote hotline, co-powered by Asian Americans Advancing Justice AJC and APIA Vote, was the first multilingual national Asian language hotline in conjunction with the election protection efforts in 2012. For the elections this year, we will once again run the multilingual Asian hotline nationwide and will provide live assistance in all the languages that Christine has talked about. We want to use this opportunity to encourage voters to call 1-888-API-VOTE to get answers to any questions they have about voting. Questions like, where is my polling place? And the type of ID, what type of ID should I bring? Our volunteers can also help voters address any problems they encounter at the polls, like voter discrimination or language access issues. For example, during the 2012 election, we had Hmong American voters who were asked for ID in Minnesota, despite there being no photo ID requirements, and where a white voter was told to put away his ID when he followed the Hmong American voter in line. So as Christine has said, our hotline is going live this week. So please help us disseminate the information. Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks, everyone. Kristen, before we open it up for Arturo. Oh, I'm sorry, Arturo.
Thank you, Kristen. Good morning from Los Angeles. This is Arturo Vargas. I'm the Executive Director of the Naleo Educational Fund, a national nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that for the past 35 years has been working to empower Latinos to participate fully in American democracy. A core element of our work is voter engagement and election protection. We operate the year-round toll-free bilingual hotline 888-VEYVOTA, that's VEYVOTA, that means go and vote in Spanish. The numbers are 888-839-8682. We project that at least 13.1 million Latinos will vote on November 8th. That's a 35% increase over the number of Latinos who voted the last time we had an open White House in 2008, when 9.7 Latinos voted. In May, we released a report, Latino Voters at Risk, assessing the impact of restrictive voting 2012. We estimated that 875,000 Latino adult U.S. citizens are at direct risk of being prevented from voting because of the changes in laws and procedures in the 19 states that enacted restricted voting rights changes since 2012. Now, the vast majority of these Latino voters are in Texas, about 771,000 who were without the required voter ID required by the Texas law, and another 18,000 in North Carolina. Now, while we welcome the decisions in the appeals courts that ruled the Texas and North Carolina voter ID laws invalid, Latino voters still are at risk. The decisions are not final. We know that North Carolina and Texas are pursuing these cases. And even where courts have ordered changes to the voter ID procedures, we are concerned that the quality of assistance to Latino voters with navigating the new and changing rules are insufficient. We're concerned about the lack of adequate outreach to voters, which is why our election protection efforts this year are so critical. We know that Latino voters are following this election cycle very closely. We are witnessing upticks in Latino voter registration across the country. On National Voter Registration Day last week, our hotline received over 20,000 calls from Latinos seeking information on how to register to vote. Our hotline operation will continue all year long and up to Election Day. Between now and Election Day, our hours will be 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday. However, on November 7th and on November 8th, in anticipation of any issues that may arise as Latinos go to the polls, our hotline will be open as early as 4 a.m. Pacific time, that's 7 a.m. Eastern time, up until 11 p.m. Pacific time. And that will be at 888-839-8682, 888-VE-VOTA. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We're going to open up to reporters now for questions. So Valerie, our operator, will assist us with that.
At this time, if you would like to ask a question, please press the star and 1 on your touchtone telephone. You may withdraw your question at any time by pressing the pound key. Once again, to ask your question today, please press star and 1 on your touchtone phone. We will pause for a moment to allow questions to queue.
You can't know nurturing, and without nurturing, you can't.
And we'll take our first question today from Clint Confer with Tennessee Tribune. Your line is now open.
Thank you. We have a sizable Hispanic population in Nashville, Tennessee. Is there some message to residents of Tennessee in particular? We have had, and I say this largely because there is a sense of faith and despair because there is such a strong sense that Trump will be the favored candidate in Tennessee.
The most important message that we would have at the Naleo Educational Fund for Latino voters in Tennessee is to ensure that they register in time to vote for November 8th and that they make their voices heard. That it is important to understand that the presidency is but one election on the ballot. There are a number of elections that affect the lives of Latinos in terms of who will serve in Congress, state legislatures, city halls, city councils, and school boards. Voting is about having a voice in our democracy, not just about one election. And we encourage Latinos in Tennessee to call our hotline to ensure that they have the information about the requirements in Tennessee to vote. We know that there has been a restricted voter ID law implemented in Tennessee, as well as reduced in-person voting periods. We want to make sure that our voters have the information about how to vote in Tennessee, and they can do that by calling our hotline.
Thank you. Need to know your name and how to spell it.
My name is Arturo Vargas, A-R-T-U-R-O, V as in victory, A-R-G-A-S.
And your title, please?
Executive Director, Naleo NALEO Educational Fund.
Thank you, sir.
Moderator, next question.
Thank you. We'll take our next question today from Steve Busquet with Tampa Bay Times. Your line is now open.
Thank you very much. Thanks for doing this call. And my question is also for Arturo Vargas. Mr. Vargas, I've got a question I'd like you to address with particularity, if you can, any issues or concerns you have about the state of Florida. And the second part of my question is, we've seen a big continuing uptick in voter registration, of course, in areas with large Hispanic and particularly Puerto Rican voters. I'm talking about Osceola and Orange counties around I-4 in Orlando.
All right, folks, going to commercial break. I'll pick up on this when we come back on the Roland Martin Show.
A lot of these folks, to the data that I'm seeing, are registering no party affiliation. They're registering as neither Democrats nor Republicans. And can you address that point as well, please? Thanks.
Sure. So we are following very closely the Latino electorate in Florida. We have an office in Orlando, and we operate in that central I-40 corridor as well as in South Florida. We know that the electorate in Florida that is Latino is changing dramatically. Between 2012 and 2016, there have been 130,000 Puerto Ricans who have left the island of Puerto Rico to the mainland, many of them settling in Florida. We also know that the electorate, the Latino electorate in Florida, is particularly in tune with these elections because of the amount of attention that the campaigns, candidates, and political parties are spending on reaching Latino voters in Florida. Floridian Latinos have one of the few luxuries of being courted by everybody in this election. So we anticipate that Floridian Latinos will continue to outperform Latinos throughout the country because of the amount of mobilization resources being invested in that electorate. Now, as far as the registration being neither Republican nor Democrat, that is a trend that we are seeing among Latino voters across the country, where Latinos are increasingly choosing not to identify with one of the two major parties. Ultimately, we shall be following very closely what the turnout will be on Election Day and the preferences of Latino voters. We are doing a tracking poll that is following Latino voters that we're releasing every Monday. We have released 3 tracking polls that includes an oversample of Floridian voters. I invite you to our website at naleo, NALEO.org, and that will provide data specific to Florida on preferences by Latino voters in this election.
Next question.
Thank you. We'll take our next question from Melissa Botten with NC Policy Watch. Your line is now open.
Hi, my question is regarding Asian American voters. It's actually one of the fastest growing demographics in North Carolina, and I was wondering if there were any particular concerns here for that group when it comes to voting this year.
Hello, this is me, Moa. Is Christine still on the call?
Yeah, I was just on mute. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh. Do you want to talk a little bit about the organizing, and then I can talk a little bit about some of what we've seen? Or let me talk a little about that first, and you can chime in about the organizing. One of the things that we've been concerned about as we've been working on the hotlines is that contrary to the Latino community, many of our Asian American populations tend to concentrate in very discrete and isolated areas. And because of that, there's often not investments in doing outreach into these communities. And so the work that we're trying to do this year, as Christine has talked about, is really to get the word to the community that their vote matters and that they need to register to vote. The problem is once they actually do get to the polls, many of them are also going to polling locations where the election judges are often not familiar with the language access provisions. And so as we've been monitoring the voter hotlines, we get inconsistent calls from across the country, but particularly in areas where there's not an infrastructure to provide language access support. And so our concern is that as our voters are going to the polling locations, that they're going to be prevented from being able to bring a sister of their choice, right, from being able to have access to interpreters and translators at the polling locations. And so we will be monitoring that very closely. We've asked our local partners on the ground to actually report into the hotline as they're helping or as they're hearing people who are encountering issues.
Okay. Hi, this is Christine from AAPI. Apologies, I was having trouble unmuting myself earlier. So we do have local partners in the Charlotte area as well as the Triangle area. And so obviously before this, they've been focusing on voter registration, but now as we enter into October, a lot of the work, they're going to be doing a combination of voter education events, but also having a mailer as well as phone banking to really try to also encourage people to go and take advantage of early voting or absentee voting. So that way, those who may need extra assistance, or if this is their first time as a voter, that they could have a little bit of more the luxury to actually have someone make sure that they can take the time to actually participate and know what their rights are. So it really is about trying to have direct contact with the voters, because as Mee had noted, traditionally what we've seen in the polling that has been done is that the political parties have not necessarily invested in reaching out and contacting our base of voters, especially when they're first-time voters.
Okay. All right. Thank you guys so much. Next question.
And we'll take our next question from Nick Balasay with PGA Media. Your line is now open.
Thanks a lot for taking the question. I was wondering, first, have any of the speakers on the call heard anything about an increased presence compared to 2012 of federal government poll watchers or United Nations poll watchers to prevent, or even just to report any abnormal activity? That's my first question. And then the other one was about Donald Trump's call to have his supporters look at the polls and watch the polls. If the speakers on the call agree with that recommendation, and what the reaction is to that. Thanks.
This is Kristen Clark, President and Executive Director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. We are deeply concerned about the call to activate untrained poll watchers to monitor for alleged fraud. We know that fraud is a non-existent problem in our country. There is little to no evidence that vote fraud exists. We are deeply concerned about the chilling effect that this call can have on the electorate and on minority voters in particular. And we are also very concerned about the disruption that this call can have for poll workers who endeavor to conduct a smooth election in November. So we are deeply concerned and deem this to be a potential or a call that could lead to voter suppression activity at the polls in November. We are also very concerned about the U.S. Department of Justice's recent decision to terminate a core component of its Federal Observer Program. Federal observers have been deployed to polling sites in covered states under the Voting Rights Act. So states located in the South, including Texas, California, and New York, South and North Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. These are places where there have been 11th hour efforts to suppress the African American, Latino, and minority vote. And the Federal Observer Program provided an important safeguard. The Justice Department had the ability to deploy specially trained individuals who would be positioned inside polling sites from the beginning of an election to the very end to monitor for suppression and to ensure that poll workers treated all voters fairly and evenly. Without the federal observer program in place, we may see an uptick in voter suppression, but most importantly, we are seeing voters in a more vulnerable position.
So, folks, be sure you are protecting your right to vote. Protect your right to vote. Make that phone number, call, look out for folks at the polls as well. This is the Roland Martin Show. Back in a minute.
Call 844-736. That's why I was suggesting.
Hold on one second. If you're utilizing, you're saying you need a control room with the Comrex. Why? Because if you're switching for what's the purpose?
Yeah, if you're in a, let's say if you go to the museum, yeah, we're all set.
Right. Well, I'm saying a non-studio. Well, I'm asking this. I'm asking this question. If we utilize the Comrex, if you utilize the Comrex, and you were switching locally, and you were is the issue that you don't have your Comrex rack unit in Denver? Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is that you need to go to a control room that has graphics capability and multi-camera and all that sort of stuff.
But if you're using a Blackmagic switcher, which has that capability on the scene where you're shooting it from, you're feeding that out, you're already doing that.
Right. So we're talking about the morning of the election.
I know that. What I'm saying is, if a Blackmagic switcher gives you graphics capability and is switching between cameras, that's what you already have.
We're paying for that truck rolling one way or the other.
No. I'm not talking about the paying with the truck. I'm speaking of, because you were talking about the morning of, and if you were saying if you could not do it at the restaurant, if you had another location, and I'm just simply saying, if you're utilizing the Comrex and you're utilizing multi-cameras in the Blackmagic switcher, you don't have to go through the control room because it's giving you graphics and switching capability.
Well, I guess we need to figure out what location we're talking about. It seems to me that the smartest thing to do is to do it from the restaurant if we can do it. All your manpower is going to be there later. You have a